65 years on, fight for freedom continues, as you have just seen in this film. This year marks the 65th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day. The sad year when His Holiness Dalai Lama, our leader, went into exile to India, and some 80,000 Tibetans followed him to India and other neighboring countries, including Nepal and Bhutan. Just this morning, the Royal Borough of Greenwich hoisted the Tibetan national flag in show of support and solidarity with the Tibetan people for their peaceful campaigning for their own rights. And this gesture is very much appreciated and noted, not only by those of us living in the Royal Borough of Greenwich, but Tibetans throughout the world, especially those who are inside Tibet and who cannot express. I think this sort of simple gesture gives our Tibetan brothers and sisters in China's occupied Tibet the hope for a brighter future one day. So, Woolwich being the headquarters of the Royal Borough of Greenwich, when it hosted or when raised the Tibetan flag in September 2015, when His Holiness Dalai Lama came to the O2 Center, where he gave public talk and teachings to over 10,000 people. That welcome gesture accorded by the Royal Borough of Greenwich has really touched us Tibetans, not only in the borough but in this wonderful country. Actually, Tibet has a long connection with Great Britain. Actually, this very particular place, Woolwich, in the 1910s, like mid-1910s, 15, 16, 17, and certainly in 1920, two young Tibetans from Tibet, they arrived actually in the UK in April 1913. And two of them actually attended and received education and training just there, Royal Arsenal, one of them. And the other one received military training at the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich. That was the period when Tibet wasn't independent, and Tibet was very much welcomed and supported by the Great Britain, or when India was under British rule. So at the very highest level, with His Holiness the Great 13th Dalai Lama, British officials or top leaders was making that level of connection to support and to help the Tibetans to modernize Tibet. Sadly, after People's Republic of China was established by the Communist Party of China in 1949, the fate of the Tibetan people changed forever. In 1950, China started invading Tibet from the eastern frontiers. As you have heard in the film, spoken by our leader, His Holiness Dalai Lama, as of 1983, 1.2 million Tibetans died as a direct result of China's illegal occupation of our homelands. I think this is something we must not forget. This is exactly why Tibet Matters. This public discussion forum was started by 4 of us. We were having just chat and see what we can do for our country and for our brothers and sisters. How can we help to revive and have dialogue and discussion on Tibet? Ugyan Nubula, he is the longest resident, as far as I'm concerned, Tibetan, living in the Royal Borough of Greenwich. And he was a former General Secretary of the Tibet Society for many years. Ugyan was also the treasurer of the Tibetan community in Britain, an amazing help to Tibetans who have come to Royal Borough of Greenwich. And I know from my student days in the late 1990s, visiting Ugyan's house, and he was looking after me. So it goes long way. And then we have another friend, Jamyang, also former council member, who was campaign coordinator, web designer, and administrator. The current website actually of the Tibetan community was designed by Jamyang. And then my close neighbor and friend, Phuntsok who was a former vice chair of the Tibetan community in Britain, and myself, Tsering Passang, a former chair of the Tibetan community in Britain and founder and chair of Global Alliance for Tibet and Persecuted Minorities. We came together for a good cause, we believe, and we had passionate discussions how to go about this program today. And we jointly decided very democratically that how this program should be run. And for that very reason, 2 older, shall I say, Ugyan and myself are to speak, and then we welcome and invited 2 young Tibetans, Jamyang Serso and Dr. Tara Urquhart. Both of them were born in Europe, and we are here to share our perspectives on why Tibet matters. I've just given you a brief background of Tibet context, but I'm not going to talk about the subject right now because we impose no restrictions. This is only the theme or title, but speakers can speak whatever they like. They can speak in Tibetan, English, or any other language. It's completely freedom. Now, one thing I would like to make clarify, if I may say this in Tibetan. Tani sumju tudeng ki tunda dita sumju tudeng da wacha yungwe re chinda sumbe tsewa chula manzus Ugyan ge Phuntsok ge koti betone London la ya kasore ngomde chunggo ta kana shunzor kembe ge ta dedi shinge kasore lerim dus panti de yore ini yan tari chinda sumbe ge tsewa tu resa lakwa nin 공다 데라 다리치고 된다 저라je 지단이 가지고 가르치고 도스는 가지고 고도 지역을 했대 이니 양 달리 답이야가들라 다 벽이 계다디 올리치기 타운홀라 댕이디 드링 답된 거래 가르스나 레서 니마디 레군 고접셔고 요래 송사 레서 학발라 나가르 답된지 쇼게 계다 댕이 유디 삼라 디 공달라 지나스 간데 도스 답쟁 가지고 무딩토니 다 둔다 신나로 가지고 고도 지지네 땡케 버지 차고 요래 디야 세시지 마지 바이네 고노 대회기 년가시 통인 것도 가지고 대승주들은 싸와지 방트가 두고요 말이 다리치가 두고요 말에 디야 축마대 기체돌라 또는 예세시지 간데 벽에는 슈나로 삼성 다 딘데지를 샤나마도 양이 뒤쪽다고도 가서 가지고 계시에 막 보이란 티바til에 손자 가수래 모두다고 디가랑 샤기 다 단다 간주기 제림도 고마주가 nye 찍 템바치샤 Kede fire drill the Chashike yo Marisi, Kede Fire alarm Chikawan in Nature Chumba, and the meeting point the Kablo, Choda patron and Rosachi, and in part Chikanda, Koranzo Charon and Yungre, on the Chishuna or Samsung Tango de la Tatari coming again. Mishidos Panche, Tating Odu, Shipsi, the Phuntsok Nangre, Inia, Tanyeki, and the Langend of the Konzo Kosha Jabdisamblia, Phuntsok Nobula, and the moderator, a chatting Yotarin Toling, Tatolings and Draduti, Tamling Chiedela, and a young Kronging Odu, the bits of Shunado Samson, and a Phuntsok Taikondo Shuganashi, Puris of the Toso Surba, Chick. The London School of Tibetan Language and Culture gave permit to me. The Ni, Ani Tingolia, Woolwich Tashling Lobde gave permit to me to Tiganashi Greenwich Tibetan Association gave board member Nangigan, so was she again. Tabuta Injilung Banata Nuntala, Conatina Oshna Yuri, and Dikalani, Nebes Gamna Samso, and the London School of Tibetan Language and Culture. Di ani tsugen na lo ne ta tsugen sena do nga tsu chokdi chi je zo di sanel yoge slaba imina yoge nga mixe ke London na yoge pepe puri tsu kala doza chi de tunde yoeng ge chi do lobra di shiujikali gyab je chok sangme ki pezen chi ra ne phame tume di ne Phuntsok indi ka so shukshida gyab che kanda nga zo di tumje sambu chi ten yore ta ndi ya sudu burdu tune nye chuna lo samsum ta konan gyagala imba ina ani kasugre Chandigala, Torino Dobe Capsulia, Purawa Dembe Legu, Tibetan Freedom Movement, Regional Tibetan Freedom Movement, Tsozona, President, then Regional Tibetan Youth Congress, Sani Shunu, Chandigargi, Tsoshinasha, Chandigalia, then TCB Lopta Kasara Nalia, Penju, Dodamba Sigro, Liberian. Tini ya CS Chandra Loptalia librarian, the Chizona subject in the Shunyunge, machine young Anzunium dot in the Lakashi, that in the Chiyure, the Kasure, Burgazadian Tolia, that in Shumuache, that in the Dodo de Motor, to which Dinte, Ane Negi, Tage Chikti, Shuecha, Mazupesh and Mazu Kodichi, Mishi Yurte, Sum de Pearl Tungure, Arantibu Payulike Yure. Chizanga Penny Tungo, Chizu Penny Yam Dole, Susa, which in the Legachi, the Negato Sigu, Nangi Yamyo Sonsa, that the Gats and Nishanado Samsa, and attending a pencil at the Nishuna, Rolla.
Passang, thank you very much for your welcome speech and introductions on topic why Tibet matters. Thank you very much. Now I would like to request all the panelists to take your seat. Thank you very much. Ugyan, please. Okay, now we're going to start. Thank you, Passang, and touch the leg, and good evening to everybody. I'm Phuntsok Norbu, Tsering Passang, as mentioned. I'm pleased to moderate our panel discussion on why Tibet matters. We are fortunate to have Tibetan speakers from 3 different generations who are born in 3 different countries. As Sri Passang said, Tibet, Nepal, and Europe. Especially, we are proud of having two youth speakers. They are very active, very energetic, and they are the future seeds of Tibet, I considered. Topic of today's discussion is why Tibet matters. It's crucial given the ongoing tense situation in Tibet. The Chinese invasion in 1959 significantly impacted Tibet's political, cultural, social landscape, leaving the Tibetan people one of the most oppressed under Chinese forceful occupations. Our esteemed panelists will further speak on this. Now let me introduce our panelists. I'll start from Tsering Passang, founder and chair of Global Alliance for Tibet, Persecuted Minorities, and former chairman of Tibetan community in Britain, former director of Tibet Foundation, and former special advisor and counsel of Tibet Society. And Tsering Passang is also activist and also article writer. Next, we have Damon Sesola, who holds a master's degree in genetics, and Damon has participated of the International Youth Forum in Dharamsala 2023 and non-international conference of the Tibet subgroup in Brussels 2024. He is currently the VTech UK coordinator. Third speaker, we have Ugyan, former General Secretary of Tibet Society and Tibet Relief Funds for 15 years, and former treasurer of Tibetan community in Britain for 8 years, and so on. Last not the least, we have Tara Ramola, GP, former SFT board members of UK, currently served as the culture secretary and youth coordinator for the Tibetan community in Britain. Now I've finished the introduction, and today's topic is why Tibet matters. This is not a conference, but informal discussions, mainly conversation between the presenter and the audience. So the audience engagement and participation is very important to all of us. Before we begin our discussion, I have some ground rules to the panelists. Keep presentation short, brief, and focused. Presentation should be ideally be 10 to 15 minutes long with a 5-minute warning. Be mindful of your words considering the pervasive nature of social media. At the end, we'll have a question and answer session with the audience, and I said the audience engagement and participation is very important. So without any further delay, now I would like to tell Tsering Passang to start his first speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Phuntsok. That's a very tough rule here. I'll try to do it within the given time frame. Thinking about this title, Why Tibet Matters, sometimes we just think from the Tibetan context, just, why Tibet matters to us. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to look from 4 different angles. Why Tibet matters to the Tibetans. Why Tibet matters to the Chinese or China. Why does it matter to India? And why does it matter to the world? These are my not deep thinking or thought, but from my experience, and I share my perspective basically. As Tibetans, of course it matters to us, Tibet, because it's our birthright, because our parents, even though I may be born in Nepal or outside Tibet, but my parents, we have ancestor to Tibet. So it's our birthright, I say. It's our home, homelands. It's our culture. It's our language, religion, and most importantly, Tibetan civilization, not to forget the history. unfortunate chapter since the CCP came to power, especially after 1949 and 1950. Yes, as Tibetans, our elder generations may or had made some mistakes, but as the younger generations, wherever we are born, we learn from the lessons, from the wrongs that we have made, and move forward whilst recognizing our strengths and weaknesses, as well as opportunities and challenges. We should challenge the CCP regime. What's happening in Tibet, it's not justice, it's injustice. China is on the Security Council. 54 countries in Africa continent. Whenever there is voting in the UN bodies, whether it's Human Rights Council or United Nations General Assembly, 100% of these 54 countries support whatever stands or proposals made by the PRC. That effective, 100%. And until 2008-9, or even 2015 to say, if you talk about the UK-China golden era relationship, many of the European countries also flocked to the Chinese side. I think we are sort of, to an extent, lucky or sort of brighter days is that after the COVID, especially after the COVID, the global communities started shifting from their previous interests in China. I think this is the ideal opportunity, and we hear lots, about this Indo-Pacific and so on. I think as Tibetans, we use this, study more, and use these opportunities and come out of our shell and challenge. The only reason why we came to exile in 1959, it's not because there was famine in Tibet, not because there was internal fighting. It's because PRC, the Communist China, invaded our homelands. That was the main reason. So the political persecution of the Tibetan people continues to this day. So we can talk about human rights and all other stuff, but main cause of Tibet's struggle or Tibetan facing challenges right now is because of political subjugation of our homelands by the CCP brutal regime. So that's why it matters to Tibetans to fight back, push back China. And from the Chinese point of view, or from China or PRC point of view, Tibet is a vast land, strategic purposes, good locations, rich mineral resources, good for its population because they need to go away, and water reserves, and it's perfect for especially Xi Jinping's expansionist goals. So this is good for China. So it matters to them. So they will do whatever it takes for them to keep Tibet for themselves. And now, India. Why is Tibet matter to them? We are ever so grateful to Bharat or India and its people all these years for their continued support, although not politically very overt or so on. But I think the rehabilitation programs in the early 50s, 60s, and so on, education for 10 tens of thousands of Tibetans, refugees, Tibetan refugees. I think this is, well, Tibetans we know. So, I'm sort of digressing here now. Why Tibet Matters, to India? One of the reasons why I see why India provides support is, is because Tibet and India had long historical, spiritual, cultural connections, even our language. So this was going on for so many years, and that's one reason they support us. But before that, before Tibet was occupied by China, they're talking about even 100 or even less Tibetan border security personnel, stationed on the Tibet-India border. Now, since CCP came to power, or since CCP occupied Tibet, currently we hear up to a million Chinese security personnel sort of stationed on the Tibetan border side. Likewise, on the southern, or from the Indian side, they have not so 1 million, but they're talking about several 100,000 border security personnel. And this is costing a lot of money to both countries, no doubt. I think it is for India's interest to restore Tibet as a buffer zone or buffer state, so that its security is not compromised, or its security is protected, whilst saving lots of monies on the Indian side. So I think that's why it matters to India. And of course, it's often said third pole Tibet, and Asia's water towers, so River Brahmaputra coming from Tsangpo, again, that's over 1 billion people downstream, including India, Bangladesh, they're dependent on Tibet's rivers. So I think that's why it matters to India. And culture, I've already said earlier. And this is very important, I think. The 1913-14 similar sort of agreement, and finally the treaty in 1914, McMahon Line, that demarcated today's India, in Arunachal Pradesh, for example, and the Ladakh side. Now, today China wants to claim all those back. They don't regard what that 1914 similar agreement was all about. So I think that's why Tibet matters to India. So I think there is a great deal of opportunities for us Tibetans, while we are receiving support from India all these years, but there is good interest for India to support the Tibetans at the same time. So I just throw this out there so we can have further discussion later on. Now I'm looking at the time. I will try to finish as soon as possible. Now, why?
5 more minutes.
Yeah. Why Tibet matters to the world? We hear about great games, in the early 19th century, when both British and Russian empires trying to buy influence or put influence in Central Asia, including Tibet. That was the sole reason why Young Husband expedition from India went to Tibet in 1903-1904. We don't know much about it, but some say up to 5,000 Tibetans were killed, or somebody said massacred all the way to Lhasa, and some 3,000 Indian, well-trained Indian, British soldier, but they were because British were ruling India, so they were Indians naturally. So they went to Tibet and invaded Tibet for a brief period in 1903-04. So I think it's good to sometimes revisit and sort of share these stories, and that's what I try to do when I meet with friends and make this connection. For example, village, Tibetan student coming here and studying. So I think sometimes it's good to remember this. So there was certainly interest in Tibet those days by British empires, because they feared that Russians were getting close to the Tibetan top leadership. Much later, they found that there was no Russians sort of trying to reach out to the top Tibetan leadership, but it was in fact British got right at the top, Dalai Lama, and that's why they sent 4 Tibetan students. It's said that 13 Dalai Lamas experiment with modern education. Obviously, the project wasn't a success. They say it's the failed project, but nonetheless, there were interest then, and especially after 1947, after India got independence. And British lost interest on that side of the world. And probably I should revisit this. In 2008, the former Foreign Secretary David Miliband's written ministerial statement, I think it was 31st of October 2008. That statement was what exactly China wanted. I heard that. I learned that. The very next day that statement was made or released, Chinese newspaper was all happy. They're celebrating it. Now, why was the statement released? I remember when I was General Secretary of the Tibetan community in 2009, when there was a stakeholders meeting in Foreign Office. I asked a question, why did you make this statement? And I said that it wasn't helpful to the Tibetans. The statement basically, I also, now looking back, I also question our Tibetan leadership. What briefing were they giving to the British side? Because 2008, there was a round of dialogues between Dalai Lama's representative and Chinese officials. And it was literally a week or two before Dalai Lama's representative visiting Beijing and submitting this memorandum on general autonomy for Tibetan people. Just weeks before it was submitted, the statement was released. Was it coincidence? No. They said they were looking for a perfect timing to release it. Now, next question is, I know I'm running out of time, but this is very important. The next question is, now, why that time the Prime Minister was Gordon Brown? He was, flying from one city to another. You know what? 2007, 8, 9, there was financial crisis. The big countries have to manage it, and our Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, made a very, very prominent role in trying to, galvanize global stimulus package to save the economic crisis. Everybody was looking at Beijing. Looking back, I fear that Beijing must have asked London, we'll help you, we'll support, we'll cooperate with you, but you must make this statement. Now guess what? On beginning of April 2009, there was G20 summit in London. We did a lot of protests. I'm sure some of you will remember. Now looking back, these are things of the past, gone. But sometimes I wonder, our leadership, are they doing the right thing? What sort of briefing are they giving? Now, where are we now? There's no dialogue whatsoever. We're trying to make a dialogue with Chinese counterparts. I think we'll have more discussion later. But basically, I'll summarize what I was trying to say here is that, these are some sort of situation we have seen how global how it matters to the world, to Tibet. Now that tide is changing. Now, we hear, but they want to challenge China's rise, especially after Xi Jinping became president in 2013. I think this is an opportunity, and we should reflect on this. I think I better stop now. I can go on, but I better stop now.
Thank you very much. I've got one question to Tsering Passang before I move to Damien Sesola. Tsering Passang talked about the Tibet act as a buffer zone between China and India. So at the moment, Central Tibetan administration policy is Umelam. In case Tibet get Umelam, what Tibet geopolitics gonna be? Because India looking for their benefit, because if we get Umelam, then border will be controlled by China, foreign policy according to Umelam. So what you can say about this
situation?
Situation? What India? Because everybody looking for their own interest. So if we sharing still is Tibet border is controlled by China. India don't get any benefit because still front side boundaries, foreign policy, all these are controlled by China. So what you can say on this?
Now, he has really very geniusly, came up with this medieval policy to engage with the Chinese leadership, because we also know the countries around the world were not supporting us politically. That's fact. And his Holiness has traveled, I think, lots of country, and he had met so many, not only religious leaders, but political leaders, advisors, and he knows. Now, coming to the point here, I think here, we very, very wholeheartedly submitted this written, memorandum for general autonomy for the Tibetan people, but they flatly rejected it. They flatly rejected it. They were even talking about possibly, the national regional autonomy, which actually is within the Chinese constitution. They were talking about getting rid of that clause. If that is sort of removed, there is no basis for this middle way, the basic one country, two system. This proposal is going to be there. I think there has to be a new way to re-engage. I think, I was saying earlier, this geopolitical shift, I think India has a lot of interest in Tibet, as you mentioned. Now, many countries in the West, they want to engage China to, say, challenge, with China's rise. I think, especially, this is one of the cases I'm making when I was speaking to the Royal Society of Asian Affairs the other day. Britain and Tibet are the only sort of big countries today know very well about Tibet. I think these two countries should come together and make a pact, or talk to their like-minded countries, and then come up with a new proposal and trying to find negotiable sort of solution. Because China has rejected middle way policy, the general autonomy. I think we have to find a new way, a new avenue to get it. So I think India has for own interest's sake, and this is what I've been saying as well, India has to be more brave. I hope it will be in the time comes soon. But also from our Tibetan side, Tibetan leadership, I'm talking the political Tibetan leadership, we also have to be a bit more creative and a bit more bold, I think, rather than just, of course, but I think we have to be, and he's nearly 90 now. He's 89 this year. So it's us Tibetans, whether we have political responsibilities or not. I don't know whether I gave you the right answer, but I think key thing is I think India has to be a bit bold, more bold, and our leadership also has to be more creative.
Okay, thank you, Tsering Passang. Next, we will hear from Demin Seso.
Hello everyone. To be honest, when Tsering invited me on this panel, I wasn't exactly sure what I would be talking about, since I didn't really know how to answer the question of why Tibet matters. But I think it's an excellent question to ask, especially considering the fact that, we really do have to get the public all around the world, as well as the politicians around the world, onto our side and recognize, the matters that are going on in Tibet, the situation going on in Tibet. And actually a good point to what Tsering mentioned, a lot of countries don't actually know about what's going on in Tibet, or supposedly they don't know. I've been speaking, so recently I went to the Tibet Support Group conference, which has been hosted by the Department of Information and International Relations, CTA. And, there were over 170 participants, right? All around the world, and it's not just excluded to Tibetans, there were non-Tibetans as well. And I've spoken to, a couple of folks, people have also been mentioning this, like, some support groups in Brazil, in Latin American countries. And their question was literally, how do we approach the politicians there when they don't even know what's going on in Tibet, what the situation is with China and so on. So, a lot of good points that have been made. And I think, with the geopolitical side of things, that's a really important point to make as well, especially given the context of the current situation throughout the world, right? I mean, we're talking about Ukraine, Russia, war, we've got Palestine, Israeli war, fascism practically being on the rise throughout Europe. It's a time of conflict. And I think, in a way, Tibet is kind of a symbol, and the Tibetan movement especially is a symbol for the rest of the world on how to approach, tyranny and conflict in a non-violent manner, essentially, right? So in that sense, Tibet is really important to the rest of the world. How do we deal with conflict, right? And going back, to the Tibetan Buddhism approach, the values there, and then, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the teachings of compassion, right? A model, essentially, for approaching conflict. But more than that, we all know, obviously, the human rights issues that are happening. I mean, I don't have to go there. It really stands as, a testament to the current situation around the world and, what has to be pretty much done, although that isn't, entirely clear. And I guess that's the reason why we're having discussions like this today. It's a really important discussion to be having, right? Why Tibet matters. What do we tell our leaders in order to get them to move pro-Tibet, right? But, other than the current geopolitical situation, the significance of Tibet, we also have climate change, right? It's a very hot topic these days, increasingly more so. The Earth is warming up, and that has very significant repercussions on the Himalayan mountains, right? The climate there. The climate is warming up, the mountains are breaking apart, it's causing, accidents within Tibet, the mountains are falling apart quite literally onto villages. And this really isn't being helped by China with the fact that they're building hydro dams, they're controlling the water flow to the countries further downstream. You've got India, like Jojo mentioned earlier, and all these other countries that are depending on the water source, being mentioned to be the third pole. So you've got billions of people that are dependent on the water there, and it's being polluted by the mining, and it's being controlled. The volume of water that's going downstream is being controlled. And as climate is getting worse, the water cycle is also being affected. So we're expecting less water to be available from the Himalayas. And I know this because I went to this conference and we had a climate scientist who's actually based in Scotland who came to show us the facts, the actual, the data. So it's quite a tough situation, and this is, with countries like UK and just in general Europe, they made certain pledges in terms of becoming more green. These are things that we can hold them more accountable, essentially, right? And essentially go kind of more pro-Tibetan, ideas, things that could be done, right? More, let's say, what's it called? foreign officials visiting Tibet, what the situation actually is over there, what kind of emissions are happening, right? This sort of stuff. So again, I mean, from my perspective, what I'm talking about is really why Tibet matters to the rest of the world and how we can use that in order to enact change, right? But then we have a very difficult situation of culture, Tibetan culture. I guess you can look to me as a prime example. I'm trying to learn Tibetan, I'm not 100% there yet. And I think, as time will go on, we have more Tibetans coming out of the communities in India, so more, dispersed throughout the world, and they are obviously, really they're having babies with other cultures, right? They're getting, they're embracing other cultures more. We are becoming more westernized as time goes on, right? So that's something that we all have to consider. Obviously, some of the elder folks have been saying, we have to learn about the history. I completely agree. That gives us the backing as well, obviously, in terms of advocacy, right? But also, culture. We've got the Wednesday Gosha dance now, which is really good, right? The lessons on the Tibetan language, all of these things are really good, important. And I guess a question, since this is meant to be an open mic discussion, every single person over here, please have a think about this. I ask this because it's a question that a lot of the Tibetan youth, they've been asking themselves, especially those that are similar to myself, who are mixed, right? And who are not born in Tibet. They are somewhat lost. It's becoming somewhat of an identity crisis. So a question to you all, something to think about, perhaps a philosophical one, is what does it mean to be Tibetan, right? What is a Tibetan identity? I think this is something that should be thought about more as time progresses, as Tibetans continue to disperse throughout the world and so on, and with the uncertainty of us getting our country back, right? That's unfortunately a reality we have to think about. How quickly will we get to the point where Tibet will be free, and what do we have to do in order to preserve the culture, right? I represent VTAG. On this panel, I've been doing a lot of work for VTAG, and what we're about is about advocating. Ideally with politicians, foreign officials, and so on. But a lot of the folks that are also on VTAG are from SFT. Free Tibet, so they do activism as well. So with all these different points that I've made, and I'm sure some of the other points that the others on the panel will be discussing as well, I would encourage the youth to, and everybody else to encourage the youth to start thinking about these things. What are the best ways? Like Tsering mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities out there, right? Especially given the fact that the youth, they've been getting their nice university education, right? While our parents, my father who's in the audience, has had to go into exile from Tibet, had to struggle in order to place us into these Western countries where we have a better life. How can we make use of these opportunities? Come together. What can we do for the Tibetan cause? And it does not necessarily have to even be tied to any organization. It doesn't have to be SFT, right? It doesn't have to be VTAG. If you have an interesting project, that could contribute, simply go and do it, right? And if you want some support, us here, we're all available. Everyone in the audience is available. Your parents are available. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be, advocacy related stuff. There's been some talks as a result of the conference about, Tibetan arts, filmmaking, for example, right? We're looking to collaborate more with groups all around the world, including in terms of art stuff, trying to create a platform so these things can flourish. Filmmaking, for example, is an incredibly important art. It encourages people, it motivates people, it teaches them history, right? I myself have become more motivated to become an advocate because I saw a screening in Dharamsala hosted by Stories for Tibet, right? It was an old documentary, I think about around the time like 2008 or so. But it reminded me that the reason why we do this is because There are fellow Tibetans who are in Tibet who are struggling against the CCP tyranny, right? They go through crazy amounts of, torture, the oppression. If you just have a listen to the political prisoners, the stuff that they go through is just absolutely mind-blowing. While we are over here, they are over there. We are over here just kind of enjoying ourselves, and they are over there going through everything, that's being put on them. And, the way I feel is we have the opportunity to speak up, so take that opportunity and, be the voice for these folks out there. But beyond even, Tibetans, I mentioned all these other conflicts. It's about humans, just every day, all individuals throughout the world going through this sort of suppression. It's not something that we're comfortable kind of thinking about, but, it's just the reality of what's going on around the globe, and it's something that we have to kind of, consider how can we support. And I know, day to day, we have jobs to get to, family, rights, dreams to achieve, and so on. But any form of contribution, you'd be surprised, it goes a long way to helping out with the Tibet movement, as well as, all these other movements. And I guess I'll kind of finish it off with, I'm a history fan. I like to read my history, especially the Roman Empire. And, in their time, the Roman Empire, I think, it stood for, I didn't major in history, by the way, I just like to read, that's it. But they stood for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, and, people who have thought, Roman Empire, it's everlasting, glory of Rome, all of this stuff. But eventually they collapsed, despite how much power they wielded and what the perception of the neighboring countries, the rest of the world, who knew of Rome at least. The Roman Empire collapsed. And I think, with the instability that China is going through, right, internal, external as well, we've got the Uyghur movement, the Hong Kong movement, the Tibet movement, and there is more collaboration, I'm talking like, at this conference I was at, we've had all those movements come to as well, right? And there's been more talks about collaboration, right? And how can we make things happen as well, like more strategic planning. So, not to give up hope is basically my point, right? I think we are getting there, right? Slowly, we are getting there. So, continue supporting, continue doing what you can. And, from VTech's side, I guess I'll finish with this. We hope to, increase that level of collaboration with all the other groups. And we're already doing it in the UK with Free Tibet, SFT, a number of other organizations, TCB, but also we're getting more involved, VTech chapters all around the world, and also the different kind of organizations out there. So more work, more concentrated, smarter work is going to be done. And to that end, we hope to, I've mentioned this before, to conduct trainings on, how can we best get there? What goes into thinking about, the advocacy work with parliamentarians, foreign officials. How can we best create the kind of platform for Tibetan arts to flourish, right? How can we, utilize digital platforms, digital tools in order to be a more effective voice, or even create more opportunities for Tibetans worldwide, right? So I call on as many of you as possible to support that, in whatever way you can. That would obviously go a long way. Really appreciate that, and keep the hope burning. We'll get there eventually. Support us as the youth start taking over as well. The youth get more involved, join the ranks. The baton gets passed on. And that's it from me. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Damila. Before you were busy with the university studies, after completing your master's degree in genetics, then you have attended a couple of conferences, one in Dharamsala International Youth Forum, and one recently in this international conference of Tibet subgroups. So, which factor led you to join these summits or conferences? Who encouraged you to join? Or what led you to go to attend these meetings or conferences? In a short, just we are running out of time. Thank you.
All right. Really good question. So the opportunities are actually as part of VTAG. Obviously, these things were CTA. They funded these conferences in order to encourage the youth, in order to become, more oriented towards advocacy, in any way that they can. And really, it was about meeting all the different folks that are already doing work out there. And it really was an excellent opportunity. I mean, I met so many people around the world, and I'm already in touch with them. So many business cards have been, handed out, and so on. But in terms of why I started, going out into these conferences and getting more involved, it actually began with an idea for getting the youth more connected, right? So getting more kind of events out there, and seeing what we can do. Again, not necessarily, it never really started with advocacy stuff, but more about keeping that community spirit alive. I especially took the inspiration from all the different events that have been hosted in London, right, by TCB and other organizations. And two of the folks in the audience have actually been in their initial team that were considering doing and were helping out and obviously participated in the different events that we did for the youth, just casual. But that's really it. So what I would also recommend is if the youth or any Tibetans actually in general, right, joining VTAG, it just means that you will get that communication channel to have an awareness of all the different events that are going on, all the different opportunities that are out there. But just get in touch with me, and I'll send it over to you. The more of you come, the better, right? It's obviously a great opportunity, and really help us out as well. That's it.
Thank you very much, Damen Sasola. Next, we will hear from Ugyan.
Hello. Why Tibet Matters? Why Tibet Matters? Why Tibet Matters? It should bring a message itself to your heart. Are you a Tibetan? And if you are Tibetan, does it matter? It should matter, right? Sometimes Dawachigla Miji Tuyo, Tumatujire, Timato Tueo Mari. Tinde Chidu Chijang Mil, Tungo, Tiki get the shape of war. Rangsing the shape of war. And you have watching the shape of war. Tinde do Tide to go watch Tongor. Tapela Chiktongo can up to Gimura Garo Yomar. Garo say the Kawaii in the Tungo. Roa Perke Mato 자로 그게 저기 오마 쑥 간게 저거 로 재미게 저거 오마 시비에 오마 삼로 코고요 오마 다 등산 데 벼바 재미게 자고 좀된 가르에 투슨 세왕 오고라 인치 면지 자가 자고 해야지 차루도와 다티 티 why Tibet Matters 이거라 좋아 why Tibet Matters 이게 소소의 인증나라 삼을 레벨나라 딩게 디 시자도 지고 배바 망보 매바이나 배바 망보 민망보 시우지기 삼상 해패도 말 미삼로 땅게다 깔레제게 카시지 답시 자투를 알로 자투를 된다 대면기 엠파이어 세겐티소 슉침보 가져이네 말이 줘야지 레스도 나한테 통고요 자지 자기 통네 엠파이어디 리줘야지 로 앞서마디 비체지 왕자 차당 요럴 때 간데 쇼도 위험에 코로나 고마서 비체지 쇼도야지 쇼래지 요래 주지 샤야 아니 법바이나 난좀 민용용래 창용래 쓰지 대요 쇼자 깔래자 유대의 톤에 미체중 창마라 디퍼디 라왕 랑제 힘바 라왕 랑제 랑게 중rum바디 랑게 진종체니 대기여바디 로똥다네 똥다 네네요바 디 나도 수단 수는 지자 다 코유 토라 망고셔요 zam불이삼로 땅에 담는데 돈에 코야 뭐 잡시 줘도 뭐 보셔 나도 배봐 다 인지게는 concentrate로 concentrate 가발라 슉자고도 하스나 why Tibet Matters 해줘 벽이 된다 때라 슉자고 배봐 수도 쓰게 슉 때리 슉자고 디 가르 슉슉 가르 쓰나 슉디 치쇼디 가르 야스나 난주 찹시 지겐들 찹시 마시를 소리지 최 순경들 최 마시를 소리지 제제 난주 직 벽예갑 직다 미릭직 쓰게디 소마도 소리지 제제 총점지라 제니 아니 난주 차 두개지 용거 이 중요하래 중요하래 요말에 중도 중민도 있다 이 중원에 굉장히 많로해 굉장히 많아야지 내가 제고요 가래 별 계급지다 미릭지 있었지 로똥단에 똥단에 계급이 딱 보자고도 쓰네 와 다고자간디 나네 제제 이는 나네 코네 켜네 미네 쓰는 진네 깔래 때문에 제가 그 민주배 좀제 가려 zam불이 개가 망고 시비죠 할때 저도 민주배지 중도에 중어 말다 그거 도구 쓰죠 봐서 그거 민주도도 세비는 가는 거래 연구요 말다 대인들도 막 나랑 저 찹시비 시기면은 찹시비 시 장고 얘가블 가르 그거도 얘가 되게 얘가 다 미릭디 때나 아니 그 대를 쳐다 리슝 고유생의 상 따투리 땅하도 왜요마 베베 밀라 뭐만 나라도 리슝지기 돈에 같이 슉 침부지 추기 리슝들라 슉잡대 나도 리슝디 슉대 가와자 보고 도스네 윤대 탐제 출래 고요 출래스게 대 개심 보러 봐 세리 고도와 아니 추에 고로 봐 추와 추지기요나 추지기요나 추 고래 땡땡 보 진대 여번에 제주가지 아 제가 제주에는 야고래 빼야고를 쓰네 간 이네 추 진대 매매 나 잡지 지기 있으네 나 세리 빠지기 있으네 nga xingba chigi yinsi tiye juzo ba juzo tol ba janga yoba jangsa yoba college universities zo na janga yobe miriksi so ti ngaran to samno yako chitang ti yongaya jare te ya gyab thone wa jare jedan da nga nge shue di te kyo do kan sa ma che nge khari shu ina shue di pyogi temba chapsi pyo rawang tang ma de be ge je te me changma ti ge san nge shue di na changma rangzen tang dewa yube ge je shi da yin ani rangzen di chungna mangzu di chungna khar sore mangzu di chungna ani namcho rawang sigi di chungna ani tizo ge tone pepe soa di pepe mila rikpa yorbe yomarbe na rikpa tseme rikpa di pecho tangdang di mati bayi na nganzo di kyo shuk shuk ti yin du zamba nganzo la choga chulu sigi de gugu yorma rwa chö chinto yu na chö chigo sanje chomdin digi sompe chö di chigo ti tinte yin du nganzo chapsi di mi changma ki gaya ki chapsi chigo mi changma ki gaya ki langjo chigo ti nge chebi na gegab chikta mirik chigis ti gyachambo rada gegab chikta mirik chigis chik nye re de gyachambo shiblo gegab chikta mirik chi ne su na ani shenda changma pabala goya changma chasang ne kruba ti shindugui kachambo tongdo tinte cha tu chikchidu nga pöne gedwa pöne gere ani gemi mayong kone gesha gedu chikchidu bawa tesu yungdu nga yudu gemi su kanga yom gem merik sige deri yoma das rwa ta china to ine o nge paba ina nge paba tudo 별 중도도 재미 오마다 답et 공도 여바 주고 말다 생활당 거 벽이 깨다 리슝 다 가서 보딩 스몰 세지도와 안티자 카레 미만데라 유믹데라 깨지 치 말이 비체체 야 오케이 피니시 Come do that.
Thank you very much. I will come back to our maybe I'll ask you one question. Let's first finish Tara. Father last because we have Tara.
Okay. Tashtile. Mani nganzo panelists mangcha ki lempe masi apojaso that Tibetan tomutanja kala hapuresha why Tibet Matters is a very big topic. Da kama chujongas nangota nganzo la thumare. Ini ta goni chikpa mala thundar da khaichne phegi ta zambling la khaichne ke chumbo yorela na. Ta nganzo changma mi reani humanity yorada. Suine ki lungba kharine ki mijik nyangna nganzo human rights kola samotang gore humanity diora ta nganzo pheba la khachne kechimer ta khama khane nganzo pheba ina ting nganzo ki khare identity ra that this is about Tibetan identity ta indela na ngata this che ta pheba ki perspective ta shinge ki perspective for this law samsoda so the England langanzo pepa chizu ngata yapu thungudura nganzo mangcha kaleja haru baruchine nyamdo chugi sangudura inegi the nima jina da thanda jina pepa bed mangador ta dilana ra pepa ki thapsila chinge ta jikya kalejange mangador re sangudura ine tigi shidas Nimazina gi mi daudo chiduro feeling til ngara legidura that nga suchila criticize chigime accuse chigime but I think it is something that is quite noticeable Kazan anzo the Frankfurt la VTech conference la doti ra the Europe lungba shemba nanglo la ra pepe pet nyunga yungi lungba de mangbuto. So nganzo da Toronto in nganzo pepa nyunga yora ta kai mare kembe la mi nyunga lenai kyo mare ta inde sam sangada. Ini ta Poland la nganzo le pet nyunga yore ni kembe la lengi mi ya dau sam inde dau tungu dra. Ani dikira ta nganzo pepa in sang nganzo di lenge di so it's our responsibility because na pela nganzo ninjenda nganzo ki binda nganzo anda yong에 배받은 적이 kare da rikshung da geja da indishitas chera kyoga bujo mar konzo nyangir nganzo da chigilongba yinsang nganzo da nganzo la diora da nganzo la rangze yore da nganzo chik china e zanga na dage mare segi mare indita chungyo mara ta tiki nganzo ki as a Tibetan thing nganzo ki lengere sangudura ani tiki ngi hope ra white Tibet Matters ki da changa susu tista hagu re go chu re ini gira so di chukpo menche action le di ke chumbo yore sangudo da for example ki da sumju thuden la ra da pepe maa legi tu sangudo namchile da chik so da sumju thuden la ra chua di ra chikpa chik sinya lo gangsa la le tuna yakshire sangudo ra da namji nemi khashigi nga haguwe ra susu nangmi phela yore phama phela yore da chuji chitu mare ini chitungi denzo kira sumju thuden la le tungi denzo ki ya pepe event shembala e kale jane le tuna yapu yore sangido ra kembe shembala e le tuna yapu yore sangido da tela nganzo ki kemba kela mambo yore da nima ne ugela na shi nima le tira pepe yo nyuni yore pepe chuzo di ki tanda yapu chagira Phuntsok ki kale jane Phuntsok ki sene yapu chayor da nganzo shenge insa nganzo da kali keleng gor da kasana lo chu nishu sunjus jela kali nganzo ki gemba denzu da gengo chane shuji chitu omar da nganzo ki chore sangdo kasna nganzo ki machina ani jema kali nganzo pulai lapora nganzo ki susu ki gomatsna pula khandis lawor da susu kegi ya gomashina pula phege khandela or da kegi da ke nganzo rikshun denzu changma ki denzu ki nganzo Tibetan identity sogyor. So in terms of like what our responsibilities are, that this so our responsibilities are, if you don't know how to speak Tibetan, that's fine. Please learn. That's what I'm going to say. Take it to the next level. If you don't know about our culture, certain things, there's lots of things I don't know. I'm always learning. I'm always messaging different. Some of you in our audience, I'm sure, I'm always messaging, asking questions. I think it's really important because we need to pass down all of this information, all of these things to our children, because in the future, otherwise, when our elders are gradually getting older, retiring, unfortunately everyone will pass away at some point, then if we don't take the responsibility now, then if there's no Tibetan identity, then that will be the point when Tibet doesn't matter. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we keep that the fight for Tibet, but also our culture, our language, everything alive. Because if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? No one else is going to do it for us. You can't find a lot of things on the internet. So if I want to find out something about another culture's history, another culture's language, another culture's, you can Google it, you can usually find it. Tibetan stuff you can't find. What do? I have to ask my amla. If my amla doesn't know, I have to ask someone else in the community. So if we don't keep that knowledge, all of that, we have centuries and centuries of culture and knowledge, and if we don't keep that alive by taking our own responsibility to learn about it, to know it, we won't be able to pass it on, and then not just Tibetans will suffer, the world will suffer, because the whole culture will be gone, and you can't just bring back these civilizations and cultures without having someone fighting for it and making sure to keep it alive. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Darala. I appreciate what Tara said, because situation in Tibet, everybody knows, is getting worse year by year, and we in a free country is to preserve our culture, and this is very important, because now younger generations need to take more responsibility, because now what is happening in Tibet, all this environmental pollution, like colonial boarding school, and destruction of Tibetan cultural sites. But what we can do here is we preserve, promote our culture, and the younger generation need to take more responsibility, so that we can keep our identity alive. Okay, thank you very much. Now we're coming to the question and answer sessions, to the floor. Anyone who would like to ask questions from the floor, just raise your hands and just say your name, and the journal will come to you. Thank you very much. Anyone got a question, please?
Nye chi shu nar wa de ji nye shu de rangzhen ko la shira zangma yue zangma rangzhen zhewa yor de rawa rangzhen sin shindu ki ke chimbre sam ani damen ki ngarang nawa do shu di ta koyu thola pe ya song song ani sha do mi to ta to le shira ya song song. Yeah, the empires or what sort of that, and to though it doesn't last very long. Then around the chick to get me top some of it, to need to do and to tax it to me to do it. Tax it, what you do, get me by the Korea, get me get daddy, get me around there. What? Get me. Jami mangsho segyo. 제가 고 텐데 총좀 지기 나라 라시바 나신 라보라지 전에 된조지 레레 말해서 이제 따당 칠 때는 더가를 뒤왔다. 아니 뒤 가주 루크레스 좀봐. 뒤에 하고 자나 시하고 세주지 마또 뭐마 뒤 지카사 때문에 Berlin Wall says all. The younger something checho. Tanto East Germany, the Shukchamba Shivucha, Olympic game to the Shukchamba Shivucha, West Germany, East Germany, Tangma Manga Kit. Any Marvel in Johnson to the Tartar Red hopped color, Sasuma. Any South Africa said, I did a Tawana, you Marson. Tinde give me Gabo Gunushudi, Shok Chamber Shivu, young say or Marson. Then Mogo do you do what Mogo do, any sometimes Mimi do, Naranto Mimi do something. Maybe I mean do that Karakan was sometimes me don't rack among do. Today, ya Jemma, local in name. Tata Sotor. To do Galacam Shore, me Kashi, then me Samaratan, Conto, you Mango del Tani, then to Conto young Midwat and Adu means today, my dear, so same shoe, you know, and young Toputuna, draw to that check water. Today, do Zimbabwe, say Joa, Zimbabwe, Lumba, Zimbabwe. Roba Mugabe Sigita, como se dice, de France, England, Paru, Lopton Chete. Come to university, turns out me, ma Rudisha Sindela, Maja do so. Rudisha di Zimbabwe Sorvanda, the Rudisha Lumbe Midi, Pombo de Gicaba de Ghost. Di Carla Gorsna, me Napo with the young, 로 티지식 레네 지도 말했어. 로 또 리cord 통해야 당에 이게 소고요. 도수 라브레 딱 본 우치 텐데 인식으로 와. 근데 제가 거니 고모도 뭐가 그마자니 마 자마스게 줘라. 거리라 고스에서 속다는데 잡니. 제가 이타 미파스고 걸 수세고 근데 제 로숨 그시고 인지미가 무슨 정식에 민나고 로 동다지 예 진정체 두 마리 생드 고정간 주샤 고정간 주 고모다 뭐니 신 직신인차 고니 고치게 되잖니 라데라 라데라야 개가 마치 200이 쉬고 개가 굽주 야마슨 지지 랑제 고고도 쓰니 라와 라데 고고면도 쓰니 간다서 라마 라데 고고도 쓰니 탑치고래 근데 라데 고겐츠 라데 미고자마도 마자고 인지 메지 마자고 말다 알캄지 자고 리나 망고지 제고 도대체 아니다 마자기 메세요 말이 자고도 나도 자고 여고와 이게 좀 쉬워 통통
If you haven't got any questions, if you would like to share your views, your thoughts on today's panel discussions from the audience, most welcome.
Hello. I have no questions to the panel. I just want to share some of my opinions from my experience. And just to let you know, I was born in Tibet, and then I went to India to do my further studies in TSV school, and then went to Chandigarh to do my BSc. And then, thanks to a government in exile, I managed to get education and traveled to Poland to study there. So while I was in Poland, I went to Poland in 1994, and Poland regained its independence in 1989. So that's almost like 4 years after they regained independence from the Russian, Communist Russia, yeah? CC, Russian, yeah, Communist Russia, let's say that. Okay, so what I learned from them, from their experience, or let's say studied from them, is that Poland is a small country which was under, control or occupied by different countries in the past. It was under, lost its sovereignty or independence for 123 years before, I think, 1913. And Poland was under Germany, Austro-Hungary Empire and Russian Empire for 123 years. And in if I'm not wrong, 13, they regained independence. And then Second World War started. And again, they lost their independence, yeah? But they fought for it. They didn't lose their hope. And in 1989, they regained their independence second time. And Poland is now a very developed country. And it's showing lots of examples to different countries on this planet. While I was in Poland, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he visited Poland for many, many times. And once we had a small audience, we had a small meeting, let's say, with His Holiness, Tibetans and His Holiness. And His Holiness reminded us to study about Polish history, and he also requested one of our, older friend to actually translate the Polish history into Tibetan, because there's lots of things we can learn from that country and from their history. So in relation to this, panel today discussion, what I can say is we can't lose our hope. Tibet matters to all of us. Once we wake up in the morning, open our eyes, until we close our eyes, Tibet matters to especially all of us here in Tibetans, yeah? And it matters to all as well. The points are made here by the panels, yeah? So I won't say anything on that, I won't add on that. But I want to encourage all the Tibetans who are listening today that we can't lose our hope. That's one thing. We can learn from other countries, like Israel, like Poland, yeah? There are lots of things we can learn. Let's say even we don't get our independence in 150 years, but we can't lose our hope. We have to keep our tradition, we have to keep our culture, we have to keep our identity strong, and the unity among ourselves. That's the main thing. If we lose our unity, that's it. If the root of the tree is gone, the tree will fall down. Doesn't matter how much we try to hold the branches, it will fall down. Anyway, so the root of our success is our unity. And along with that comes keeping in strength of our culture and tradition. And we have to be proud to be a Tibetan. Doesn't matter whether you speak Tibetan or not Tibetan. If you're proud about the Tibet, and if you have an urge to, fight for the cause of Tibet, you can do lots of things, especially in these Western countries. So we shouldn't lose our hope. And I'll say we will gain our independence one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sola, for sharing your viewpoints. Thank you very much. Any more questions or would like to share? Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, and this is a really quick one. It's a point that has been made. I think it was Sejongla who mentioned this one, right? Or it might be another kind of speaker that I've heard from before. But I mentioned the Roman Empire thing, collapsing and so on. The thing is, right, like it's so important to stay hopeful, stay believing that one day Tibet can still be free. Never lose that hope, because let's say if the opportunity comes, tomorrow, right, or in like a year or something, right, and China crumbles, and then we don't have that hope, right? We're not ready for that opportunity. We're not ready to see and seize that opportunity. Then that's like a fault of ours at that point, Like we had it right there, and we never managed to grasp it, right? So going back to like the internal destabilization of China, right? The instability, with supposedly the CCP officials, the folks in government, no more than 3 can stay in one room to meet, right? And that just shows the level of insecurity that the higher-ups have in terms of the coups that could unfold, right? They're going back to kind of that breakdown of the whole, potential breakdown of the whole structure, right? So, being aware of the opportunities as well as hope, I think absolutely critical, so we can really seize that moment, just bounce on it. Anyway, that's it from me, yeah.
One important point everybody more or less knows, I think. One important point that more or less everybody knows, I think, is that on the 17th of March 1959, His Holiness the Dalai Lama flew. And then in 3 or 4 days landed in India. When Mao Zedong phoned his military commanders, "Where's Dalai Lama?" "He's gone." Said. Well, then Mao Zedong was shocked and said, "Now it's finished." Meaning China hasn't been able to grasp the necks of the Tibetan people. Yeah? the leader of the Tibetan people, fled. They could not capture. And that is the time where the winning of Tibetan starts, and the China had the greatest opportunity to control Tibet completely. That was lost. It's just like the bird nest. And the nest, the bird is living there, but another bird is going to capture it to eat. Then the moment he's trying to capture, the bird flew away. His Holiness the Dalai Lama flew away. Means that we are here. You are here. Tibet matters. That's why what matters? We are matters. We matters. Because we are flesh and bones of the Tibetan people. Our parents may have grandparents or parents that have gone, but we are the seed of our civilization and our nationhood. And every day you go to fight whenever you can. Thank you.
도지소라 디 타마디 도지소라 아주 뒤집니다.
tanga Mexico to America lana gani thoma gi sonche be ya punonson ni ngarang go meji cha yimbi cha ne kar thongyo lana tanga chu motong di ta ka chimbo shu thongyo kala na ta da ngoma ta na chu shete nyong ro do yo re chidi ta dirup di panjor ke dirup la ledi gala changma panjor tang jeni ani miti ta nga chu pugu di so to kyu ma pugu chi so ni te la ni yang che khola panjor thanchi da mangpo tin go di gala da mangpo go pugu chi ma si so gyu ma ti di ta lo chin chin de so changsa jawa ina ni pugu ni nyong tha la ni so ya di ngarang gi dirin de ni ryo shi gyu ro ding ka chimbo thong gyu ngani ani dire tanga chu yukhela ta da ngarang sama shi pugu sum yo ni ma ngarang se bone ga yu ina khonso lam nya je me ngone ngarang ti pe ka chimbo thong gyu nga chu jakhap chi na jakhap te la ra tang chu yeki motong de chama nang la chu kyu ro o ti ji di gang la ani nga chu gi member de ka chimbo indi ani lo chong ti zu shi jab go ti ka chimbo re sing bo ki chi ti shu ye ni ba di tanga chu ke tang yiki ngarang taw ina na ani chinadam bin la shakchi tang ju inyang shakchi tang ju tidi ka la man kha la nya di ka la sem ba sam so ta so su pui di si gi yo nyam nyam di si yo de a ji mu chi zum ne ro sha na ke ni na la ta ji shak ne ro sha ro ti ma re sam so ta ngan ro ne ne nga chu gi le ka ka ri chi ta ku do ngan ro ne chi chi go sam so ti ne ene le di ka la ne ge la ta ta chi go go da ni nge ge la che 어디 지디가 영 아주 저통 아주 뽑아대서 된다로 다 심치 주의적그래 다 저게 지금 말 안도끼리 싱그 말에 나미 카시 랍스 디키문들레 니 라비아디 보이 랍게 보이 이게 같이 우리 찍이어리 가가슴지리 용시리스 디 찍바레스 이낭이 디리니 시잡게 건축 간댕아지네 나야 랑이 랑고 좀 챈디까리 아주 칠로라레니 로고적이요리 이나 아주 자크비오 말에 소소 제토데 가데네 야랑이 시자네 레카디 체고리 디인 트지체
그래서 도지소라 도지체 아니다 또 잠시 계속 쳐가고 드려 저한테 따라가 까마치
어떻게 모셔서 라트버지 가스나당 안서 부딩 격을 촉바이나 SFTV 타 카레네기라 답바 총도다 워크숍라 call for action 디 개충부를 라이다 다당가 call for action 기라 당 안서 이유네기 다 체계 카이네기라 call for action 기 가시지 So I've got some calls for actions for all Tibetans all over the world. My first call for action is if you're currently not going to Tibetan events or anything like that, please attend. That's number one. If you are going to Tibetan events, then please, number two, do something more. So if it's helping set up, if it's doing a speech, if it's, taking videos for the events, do something a step more. If you're a Tibetan parent and you're not sending your child to Tibetan Sunday school, send them to Sunday school. If you're not speaking to Tibetan to your children at home, speak to them in Tibetan. These are all simple steps. Everyone has work, everyone has school, everyone has things going on in their lives. But I think all of us need to take that responsibility and do what we can and a little bit more. So if you're doing something, I really appreciate everything that you are doing, but try and do a little bit more. And it's not just for your own sake. You'll find when one of the youth comes to me and says, "Oh, Aja, I want to do a speech," it's not just they're doing something good for themselves. That also encourages us. If we encourage each other, then that's so I want everyone to try and do whatever they're doing already and a little bit more. So, for example, Sunday school, some parents send their children. That's great. Why don't you now, if you can, try and help out at Sunday school. You don't have to be a teacher. You can be in the classroom helping to support the children. That's fine. That's great. If you are at that level, then next thing is, why don't you think about sort of doing some additional teaching yourself at home? So these are all little steps we can take. And if we all take those little steps, we take responsibility for our own, the things we do ourselves for our Tibetan identity, culture, language, then that's how we will get, as a community, as a people, we will then move a step forward. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarala. Due to limited time, I have to conclude our panel discussion here. If I briefly summarize key points of the panel discussions, we begin it by providing overview of the topic, highlighting its relevance and significance in today's context. Also, our panel discussion served as a platform for knowledge sharing, exchange of ideas, perspectives, collective brainstorming, challenges and obstacles and struggles of the Tibetan people facing under Chinese Communist region. Different solutions and also future action plans, exploration of diverse viewpoints, shedding light on the current situation in Tibet. Also, our panelists have talked on topics like cultural religious assimilation, threat to Tibetan identity. Also, this talk about this Chinese colonial boarding school, environmental pollution by mining, deforestation. Also, arbitrary arrest and detention of intellectuals, artists, and also racial discrimination in Tibet. Overall, today's panel discussion is very constructive, fruitful, and informative. So I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of your invaluable contribution to our panel discussion on why Tibet matters. Your insights, your expertise, thoughtful perspective enrich our dialogue, provided our audience with a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. So we are truly grateful for your time, dedication, patience throughout the panel discussions. With this, I have done my part. Any mistake, forgive me. Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to call upon Ugyan to give a word of thanks.
다 가르쳐 오래 저저 쉬는시하나로 아니 나도 또 수업할 나도 미숨도지 게데 쇼니디 중국어와 아니 가르치는 바 가르쳐도 담바 아니 신우 고 데민다 따라라 야빼 아버도 쓰시니 쉬어야 다들 권이라 빼 투지신 쉬어야 아니 잠양 파게 쇼도아 네 트릭바상 권인이 콘숨 시라야고도 마두베 지에 주마소 투지신 쉬어야 아니 넘버 2 네 미디어 도와 미디어 당하고 뭐 마시베 요 말에 빼마스기 가보추 페버디 근데 뭐데 GT기 운지 디지털 페니 빼가보추 아니 가면 빼하고 나서 아니 수수에 또 제제 카다디 권인이라 주능이라 지금 열봐 already kon shun ni le pyoshana ani pe apodos tati Tsering Passang nana la chana fu
Also, thank you very much to Cloudy, our poster designed by Cloudy. Thank you very much.
Young man. Next time you only speak Tibetan. Yeah.
Very ambitious.
Any Jamyang.